Now, it's good to notice that we are using let's analyze the code that we have here already. We have something called a console.log. If you've been writing Python or um, even C++, you guys have a way to write to the console, right? And this is the way that JavaScript writes to the console. Now I have to, yeah, no problem. Um, is that good? No problem. So we have two sides. We have a our code and we have our console, right? And we have some code pre-written here that says console.log. And what this basically does, this doesn't run our code. All this does is prints our code to the console. It doesn't do anything special. Um, it's very good to get this out of the way because a lot of people use console.log in the wrong way. And it's a way for us to validate ourselves. It's a way to know that the code that we're running is working properly because of the console. So if we have some code is exactly the same as a print statement. Yep, Ryan. So they're one and the same. And the thing about coding, and actually, I will go off on a little tangent. I had somebody contact me recently, and they wanted me to tutor them, right? And they took C++, and they were worried about taking C sharp. And I told them they're exactly the same. They're just they're written slightly differently. So if we understand the core principles of other programming languages, like I know Ryan, you're taking Python. I think Sabrina's taking C++, if I'm correct. Um, I'm not sure everybody's background, but I'm pretty sure a couple of you have taken some courses, but we're gonna make it really tangible for everybody and go step by step, and we'll learn how to write JavaScript from scratch. So, like Ryan said, this is exactly like a print statement. We'll print our code or rendered code in this code block in the middle of this parentheses to the console. And this can come in handy when we're running a bunch of code and we want to know if everything is going correctly. So if we were running, say, a calculation and we wanted to see the output of the calculation, like a visual output of the calculation, we can write, 1 plus 1, and it should be 2. So, oh, sorry, guys. We now have validation that 1 plus 1 is 2 because it says in our console after it ran this operation that the answer is 2. I mean, we all know the answer of 1 plus 1 is 2, but you can see how this can come in handy, all right? Okay. So, bare bones. JavaScript has something called data types. All programming languages have data types. Um, JavaScript's data types are very similar to other programming languages' data types. And I would like to say that all programming languages' data types are very similar to other programming languages' data types. And what do I mean by data types? There are ways that we will interact uh, or store values um, in our code, right? So let's think about um, what we would want to do in code and how we communicate uh, via the internet or the computer, right? We have two basic ways, right? We have text and we have numbers, right? So text will be stored between a set of quotation marks, either double or single. The important part is that whatever goes within these quotation marks is called a string of text, right? So if we said, hello, Josh, this string of text is one whole string of text, right? It can't be, I mean, it can be separated, but when you think of it, we think of it as one piece, right? We also have numbers, right? Unlike Python or C++, our numbers in JavaScript are all inclusive. So we can have, whole numbers. We can have decimals. Um, we can have super large numbers. They're all considered numbers in JavaScript, right? All right. I'm just gonna check my notes real quick. Um, we also have two other. Oh, we have one other basic data type, which is called a boolean, right? A boolean is a true or false value. Um, when we think about expressions, they can be either true or false. Like 16 is not smaller than 3. So this would be a false statement, right? And we can see that by if I console log it. It's false because obviously that's not true, right? So now we can think about a little bit more of a complex data type, right? We have something called an array. And an array is a collection of data objects, right? And the way that we state that we have an array or that we are creating an array is the square brackets on our keyboard, right? Anything inside of this array can be accessed very easily with its index, all right? So we can keep, in JavaScript, we can keep different data types within the same array. I would say as a good practice, we would not try to mix data types though, because we want one array to contain all of one type of data. I know that's kind of repetitive and it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but if we were searching for a name and we had a bunch of numbers and names in here, it'd be very hard to move through this array and to perform operations on both numbers and strings, all right? So the way that we hold multiple data objects, or actually instances of data objects within an array, is a comma. So once we put a comma between, well, in this case, numbers, each one of these is an index, right? And we can access them individually. So this one, so the way that arrays work, they start at the number 0 and then they add by 1. So this would be position 0. Sorry. This first one would be position 0. This second one would be position 1. This 2 would be position 2. And this 3 would be position 3. I know that's kind of confusing because I made the numbers match the positions that they're in, but I will mix it up and re-explain it. So this 1 is in position 0, this 3 is in position 1, and this 1 is in position 3. Does everybody get that? Okay. We have one more complex data type, and it's called an object, all right? An object, we state, yes, 0 is always going to be the first integer. And there are functions that go along with all of these data types that we can perform to find other indexes, and I'll show you that in a little bit. All right. Data. Okay. The last complex data type that we're gonna go over is an object. All right. And I know you've heard me use the word object before because I said data objects. So if we want to write our own data object, um, we can do that in JavaScript pretty easily. We do that with curly braces, and then um, we set key value pairs. All right, I know that's a little bit confusing. So if we want to set a key value pair, um, I'm gonna use the words key and value so that it's very easy to understand. Um, we set the key first, we put a colon, and then we put the value second. And if we wanted to make another key value pair, we put a comma, and then we put another key value pair. And obviously, we wouldn't name the key value pairs key or value. We would set like color equal to a string that says red, right? Or we would say home phone number, right? Sorry about that. To a number being your home phone number, right? And I understand this is kind of an abstract idea because we don't know really how we would use this. Um, but just try to be creative when we're thinking about an object. You know, it can really be anything. So I know this is kind of a really tough um, thing to get your head around, um, but let's try to uh, let's try to build an object of a cat, right? Uh, so we can state breed, you know, when we say tabby. I don't know if that's actually a breed of a cat. Might be or not. Um, color, you know, it's orange. Age, say 12. Name. What to name an orange cat? What? Yeah, what would I name it? Any ideas? Garfield? All right, no problem. You you took too long, so now the class gets to name it. Garfield. Okay, and now we can access every one of these values by specifying the key. All right. Okay. All right. So we're gonna take a couple steps back, and now we have to understand variables. All right. Um, Variables are how we save values and how we access them. Um, so these data types are not data structures inherently, but an array can be a data structure. All right. So like a string is not a data structure. Yes. Yes. Exactly. So sets and tuples are kind of like a variation of an array. Arrays in JavaScript are kind of special because they don't really apply the same rules that they do in other languages. Um, Arrays in JavaScript are very easy because we can add and take away from them without really thinking about it. Um, so in JavaScript, we have three ways to declare a variable. And like I was saying, a variable is a way to set data and then use data later on in your code, right? And you might be asking, you know, why is that necessary? It's because we don't want to have to rewrite code that we've already written. I mean, that makes a little bit of sense. Um, so there are three ways to set a variable in JavaScript. Um, we have let, we have uh, const, and we have var, right? After we write this term, we can give the name of the variable, right? So let's say we want to name uh, a phone number, right? Like we did before. This variable is now a phone number equal to a number, right? This is universally applicable to all types. The way that we create a variable is that we use the keyword var, const, or let. We give the variable a name, and then we set the variable equal to a value. Now, in JavaScript, in some other languages too, you can just set the variable and use it later. But for this instance, we're just going to take it slow and say that, you know, when we set this equal to our phone number, I'm just going to delete this so we have one case of it. And then I'll console log. Sorry about that. Phone number. The phone number is now printed because this phone number is equal to this number right here. Does that make sense, everybody? Cool, cool, cool. All right. Okay. So now you might be asking, why do we have uh, let's const and var, right? This is not super important to understand. Um, it's just a little good tidbit for when you're writing code, right? Um, let's think about our code, right? If we want to reuse something, like our phone number, probably won't change very often, right? So we'd want something to be used very often and not be changed. We would set it as a const or a var, all right? And if we were reusing and throwing away and not really care about the variable as much, we're going to use a let. But just keep it like there right now. It's not super important that we understand it. As we move forward, I'll explain it more. But let's just try to think about when we're coding. If something's very important, let's use a const. And if something is considered a throwaway variable, we'll use a let. All right. Um, cool. Now let's talk about functions. Um, Let me just stop real quick and ask if everybody's up to the same speed. We all understand that we have data types, which are basically the way that we communicate in code, and we have different data structures, which are objects and arrays, and we also have variables, which give us the ability to save code and reissue code whenever we need it. We're all on the same page here? All good? Okay. Okay. So, um, now when we write code, we kind of want it to be I don't want to sound lazy, but I'm lazy. I want to write code once and I want to be able to use it a million times. You know, I want the code that I write to be very flexible and reusable. And the way that we really do that very easily is we use functions, right? The function keyword defines that, you know, we're about to create a function, just like let, var, and const declare that we're about to have a variable, right? Um, so after we declare that we're about to have a function, we give the function a name, and we're gonna call this function add. All right. Um, After we give the function a name, we're gonna put a parentheses, right? This parentheses is very similar to let's look at a math function for a second. F of x, small x, equal to m plus b, right? Right? We all have seen this equation before, right? So, oh, mx plus b, yes. So we understand that f of x means the function of x, and that x is getting it passed into this equation, and what returns from it will be the f of x, right? Which will equal to y, right? Everybody understanding that? So x in this situation is acting as our parameter or our argument for this function. So just like math, if we want to pass something into our function, we need to state it within our parentheses, right? So if I want to add two numbers, then I need to provide the two numbers to the function. So A and B, all right? The name of the parameters don't matter. It's good to name parameters things that are really easily understood, but they're just acting as almost like variables that we're going to pass values to later on, right? So now that we stated that we have a function and we gave it parameters, we need to perform operations on these parameters, right? And the way that we state that we're going to start writing code within a block are curly brackets, right? Everything within this curly bracket is contained to this function. And nothing inside this block will run unless this function is called, all right? Just because this function is written doesn't mean that it's read, all right? We just said that it's there. We're not using it yet, all right? So let's make a function to add two numbers, right? So we're going to take A plus B and that's almost it, right? Not completely it, but that's basically the function of the function of the function, right? While we're here, let's set this to a new variable because I want this to be separate than a plus b. I want this new value, c, to be equal to a plus b, right? And the way that we get back a value from our function is a return statement. So when we say return c, we're taking the value a plus b, setting it to c, and then returning it in the function, right? But if I run this, nothing happens because guess what? I never called it, right? So I'm going to console log add, which is the name of the function, give it a parentheses, and then pass two numbers to it, say 1 and 4, right? And it's equal to 5 because 1 plus 4 equal to c, which is 5, and if we return c, it's 5. Does that make sense, everybody? And now, I could run this code a million times and I don't ever have to rewrite it. It just makes it very easy for us to write code once and to run it everywhere. All right. Add is the function a. Yeah. So function a and b. Yep. Yeah. So it's a function of a and b, and a and b is just adding those two numbers. The function is just adding those two numbers together. Cool. All right. So as we noticed, we have different operators in JavaScript, right? We can perform different functions just like we would do in math, you know? Um, like we see right here, we have when we have equal to, we're setting the value of something. When we have a singular equal sign, we are setting the value of this to the what's on the left, right? When we have an addition sign, just like math, we are adding. When we have subtraction sign, we are subtracting. I erased all that. 10, 3. Oh, I'm sorry. 10 and 3. It's 7. Um, when we use the star sign, it's multiplying. When we use the forward slash, what is a backward slash? The backward slash, we're dividing. And we have one last one. We have a couple, actually more. We have also one called modulo, which is a percentage sign. This is kind of a tricky one. Modulo basically gives us the remainder of the first number divided by the second number. All right. And you're probably thinking to yourself, why would we need this? That's kind of pointless. But let's say if we wanted to check if a number is even or odd, right? Any even number divided by 2 would have a remainder of 0, right? So if 10 modulo 2 should be equal to 0, which it is. Perfect. And 10 modulo 3 is equal 3 is equal to 1. Exactly right. So these are all really helpful things. We also have greater than and equal and less than. We also have double equal signs and triple equal signs, right? Triple equal signs. We can forget about this first. What this means is we are checking if the value of A is equal to the value of B, all right? So this should return false. Yep. Because the value of 10 is not equal to the value of 3, right? Same thing works with two equal signs, but singular equal signs is not the same thing. Singular equal signs means we're setting the value of B. We're setting the value of B to A. Or we're setting the value of A to B. Sorry. Okay, so we have basic operations, and we can perform those even with strings, some of them. So let's come back a little bit. And let's say hello. Remember, every time you write a string, it has to be inside of a set of quotation marks. Josh. Right? And when we add them two together, it's equal to hello Josh. You know? I've honestly never tried to subtract a string from another string before. I don't know if it's gonna work like that. Yeah, exactly. We can't perform that because they're both not a number. All right. Cool. Cool. Let's learn some other stuff that we can use inside of our functions. Right? Is everybody cool with that? Everybody understands why we need functions and why we write functions. And do we understand how to write a function? Like if I delete this, but can everybody walk me through creating a function? Like what's our first step of writing a function? And it's okay if you don't remember. Sometimes I will admit I write different languages and I forget how to write functions in some languages. And it's not a function name. Cool. Well, Matthew, you're technically correct, but add is just the name of the function, but I understand what you mean. So when we write function, when we write function, right? We have the function keyword. We have the name of the function. We have the values that we want to pass into the function. Yeah, no problem. And then we have the code block, right? Ryan just brought up another operator. We have we can do a combination of operators, right? So when we have a plus equal to sign, we are stating that we're taking the value of the first plus the value of the second, and that will be set as the new variable. I know that's a lot to take in, so I'm gonna write it down. Right? So we have a function named add, right? And it's gonna take a, right? And in here we'll have a variable named constant, right? And we'll set that equal to 2, right? When we want to take the value of a and add it to constant very easily, we can say constant plus equal to a, right? And then we can return constant. Right. The same works with minus, right? But it is not the same when we use greater than or less than, right? When we use greater than or less than, we're saying that constant is equal to or greater than a. Or if we use less than, we're stating that constant is less than or equal to a. Did everybody understand that? We're just combining the two functions of the operators. Nothing complex, and it's not super critical. Because we can also just add a plus a and set it to a new variable and return that variable. We're just making a step easier, basically. It just simplifies. It will return which one? The plus equal operator or the greater than less than equal operator? Matthew. Oh, it all depends on the operator that we choose. So if we use plus then equal to, it's going to be the value of a plus constant will be returned as constant. So we console.log 3, 5. Because 3 plus 5, 3 plus 2 is equal to 5. Um, Same goes if we will minus it. We'll get a negative number, -1. But if we use the greater than or less than sign, this is no longer a operation. This is a comparison. Basically an equal sign. Yes, exactly. It's basically an equal sign. An equal sign with a little bit extra spice to it, you know? Right. Now that we get operations, let's talk about a little bit more of a complex tool that we can use. And we got to think about everything that we're learning here as like little tools in our pockets that we can use whenever we want, right? Okay. So the next tool that I want to talk about is an if statement or conditional statement, right? A conditional statement checks for a value, checks for our expression to be true or false, and then performs an operation, right? So we have to remember that every time we have this parentheses, everything inside this parentheses is in something called a local state. It only pertains to what's inside its parentheses, its curly brackets. So we're gonna write if, then a statement that we want to check if it's true or false, then curly brackets to state if this is true, perform the operations with inside this curly bracket, all right? If it's not true, then we're not going to do anything unless we set an else block. So what we're stating here is look at the operation that we're going to pass inside here. If it's true, perform the operation inside here. If it's not, perform the operation inside here, right? So I know that's a lot of information to take in. So let's put it into practice. So let's make a variable named even. Actually, you know what? Forget that. I don't even need that. So we're gonna check if a number is even or not, right? So the way we do that is we take in the parameter that we're getting, which is a. We use the modulo 2. So if a modulo 2, if an even number is modulo 2, it has to be equal to what? Yeah, 0, exactly. So we're checking now. We're not well, it's 0 because remember, modulo means we're dividing it by the second number, and the remainder is what we have left over, is what we're going to get returned from this function. So we're dividing a number, what we're going to place into the function. We're dividing it by 2, and we're seeing the remainder, right? But this is not going to return us a true or false value. This is going to return us a value. So we have to check if that remainder is equal to 0. So in this statement, we're checking if this is equal to 0. So basically, if this is even, then return. You know, we'll just console log it. Console log even, else console log odd, right? And now I can just call this function, I'm going to call it check because add doesn't really make any sense. Check. And we're going to place 10, 11, and I'm going to type a bunch of numbers. And yes, it works. I'm going to change this to 4. So what we're saying here, what we're saying from let's go from the top, right? We have a function, right? Name check, and it takes a variable a, right? So now once we write this here, we're calling everything inside this code block. We're running this whole entire code block top to bottom, right? Um, so the first level of our code block, we're checking if that value is an even number or not. If it's an even number, we're going to return or we're going to console log even. If it's not an even number, we're going to console log odd. Does it make sense, everybody? All right. And I know a lot of this right off the bat is math based and is not going to be, and probably you probably are having um thoughts in your head like, how do I make applications out of this, and how is any of this applicable? We need to learn the basic operations, and then we can move on to bigger and better stuff, I promise. um okay, so there's one more part of the else block, um and it's the else if block. Else if. Okay, so this checks for a second value. Oh, that's in Python. So, like I said, Python, JavaScript, C++, we all have the same stuff, but we just use slightly different terminology. And if you know what the term is in Python, you can definitely just go, you know, elif in JavaScript, and then you go boom, else if right there. They already know what you're talking about, right? Um, so this else if statement checks for a second condition, right? Um, so that's kind of hard to do with even or odd, because even or odd is either even or odd. So let's change this to be a little better fitting for us, right? Um, let's check if a number is greater than a certain number. So like Google Translate it. Do all programming language functions function basically the same? Yeah. So sorry about that. All programming languages function exactly very similarly. Um, it's just the way that some some of them are structured. I would say JavaScript is the easiest because we don't need to write it in a very structured way. We can use it as we want. Python's also like that. C++ and C sharp and Java, they require a little more structure, but they all use the same operations. They all use functions. They're just written differently. They all use variables. They're just written differently. They all use arrays. They're just a little bit different. Like everything is basically the same. They just have a little bit different caveats. And um, like I was telling the student that wanted me to tutor them, once you learn one language, you can learn other languages very easily by just trying to solve questions in that language. God bless you. It just takes a little bit of troubleshooting and reading the errors that you're gonna get inside the console. I know sometimes when we see the red errors, we're like, "Oh no, what's going on?" But those red errors are there to help you. You just have to learn how to read them and not get scared by them. All right. So, in the if else statement, we want to check if let's say a number is between a certain number, and then we'll check if a number is above a certain number, and if it's not between both of those numbers, we'll go to the else statement. All right. I know that's confusing because I rambled a little bit, but we're gonna see me type it. So if a, oh sorry about that, wrong space. If a is smaller than 10, let's say smaller or equal to 10, we're gonna console log small, right? If a is greater than or equal to 20, we're going to console log large. And if it falls in between those numbers, medium, right? So in this situation, we have we're doing a check of 10, which is equal to 10. It's not greater than 10, so it's a small number. We're doing a check of 11, which is not this case, not this case, so it falls into our else block. And then we're doing a check of this super large number, which is greater than 10. So it's going to fall into our else if block. Does it make sense, everybody? We have conditions for all three situations. Okay. Brian, Ashley, Joel, Matthew. Matthew already answered. Cool. Hey, Max, you okay with this?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. If you have any questions, let me know. You can PM me. Okay. So this is cool and stuff, but I feel like this is a little bit limiting. This only can check for 2 statements. I mean, we can add more elif statements to this statement, but I feel like it's gonna get a little bit messy. What we can do is we can write a case, a switch case, right? So a switch takes an expression or takes a parameter, right? And everything inside the switch, like every other piece of code, is going to be contained within inside this curly bracket, right? And a switch case runs through a bunch of cases, and if it matches that case, it returns the value inside that code block, right? So this is where this is a little bit like Python. We're gonna write a colon, and then everything indented inside this case will run. So let's say the case is 10. And then we're gonna return, we'll just console log. Okay. All right. Once this is not super important, right? And when we want to get out of this switch case, we write a break. So after this is done running, it breaks and it returns the code, right? So we can write a case for 20. I'm just going to steal some of this code so I don't have to rewrite it. This is kind of like an elif statement where we're going through multiple cases and it will return the code that we want to run depending on the value that we pass inside here. All right, but an elif statement specifically checks for a true or false value, and a switch statement takes a value and then tries to match it against the case. It's a little bit different, but they essentially do the same thing. You're basically writing conditionals where you are looking for a specific term and then you're executing code depending on that term. All right? Is everybody good with this so far? Cool. So far we have functions, which are code blocks that we can reuse. We have conditionals, which are code blocks that run depending on an expression inside of them. We have switches, which take a value and then find a case to execute their code. Um, Next, we're gonna have for loops, which are a little tricky. Okay, just because the format for a for loop is very specific. There are different ways to write for loops, but I'm gonna teach you the most standard way, and I use them like this. And you only have to learn basically this one way. Um, if you want to learn the other ways, you can, but this is just fine. Just a standard form. So when we want a for loop, you write for, very simple. Then we write a parenthesis sign, right? Inside this parentheses, we're going to put the statements that this for loop is going to abide by. So our first statement is going to set the value. It's going to set a local variable, right? So we're going to set let I equal to 0, right? So inside this for loop, this I is now equal to 0. Then we're going to put a semicolon. Okay. Now we're stating how long this for loop is going to run for. So as long as I is less than or equal to 10, then you can run. If we surpass 10, then this for loop will no longer run and it will be broken. Not broken like it won't work, but broken as in it will execute past this code, right? Finally, we're gonna have the operation that we're gonna perform on I every time this code runs. So every time this code runs, we're gonna say I plus plus. So what that means is take I, add 1 to it, right? And then we're gonna do like we do in every other code block. We're gonna add the curly brackets. So what we're saying is that this code's gonna run 10 times, 11 times, I think actually. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, yep. 11 times in total. And whatever's inside here is gonna get processed 11 times. So if we say console.log I, all right, we don't even need a parameter anymore. So now we have numbers from 0 to 10, right? And I can probably, I mean, you probably are wondering why would we use this code? We would use this code if we need to run things multiple times. Let's say we have a long list of names, right? And we have to check each name for a certain character. We would write a for loop to check all the we would set the for loop to 0. We would set I to be greater than or less than or equal to the number of names inside the list, and then we would go through printing each one of these names, looking for what we need. All right, and this is a great way we can tie these two things in together. Remember, we had an array in the beginning of this lecture. The way that we set an array is like the way we set any other variable. We would say let names equal to an array, right? And then we would add names to this array. So we have Ashley, we would have Joel, we have Max, we have Ryan, of course. We have Matthew. Okay. So I want to print all the the all of these indexes one by one, right? And the way that we access an individual index in an array is with box notation, all right? So if I wanted to really quickly, I'm just gonna take this outside of their function and run it out here. If I wanted to access Ashley, I would say names, little brackets, and then put in a 0. Now I have Ashley, all right? If I wanted to access Joel, I can access Joel, all right? Yeah, it makes it very, very easy. Um, Now arrays have like they have functions pre-built into them that we can use. All right, and they do a lot of different things. And one of the great function that's pre-built into arrays is length. So when I type length, I'm finding out how many positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are inside of that array. Now let's notice that this is not the correct index because we start at 0. So it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it still gives us an indication of how we can access um, these in a for loop. So if I was going to access each one of these individually, right? And I didn't want it to go over the number of I didn't want to go over the number of indexes inside of the array. How would I do that in my for loop? Does anybody have a clue? Okay, no problem. So I would use this names.length inside of my for loop. So instead of setting this to 10, so remember this second expression checks that I doesn't go above 10. But I don't want I to go above the length of the names array, -1. Because remember, it goes to 5, and we only have 4 indexes inside of the names array. So if I delete all this, actually, if I delete all this, and I run check, this will run all the numbers from 0 to 4. All right, it's not exactly what we want. The same process. What do you mean, Ashley? Oh, Ashley, are you in my math class and in my lab class? Nice to see you here. Okay, so we can access now 0 through 4, right? But I want to access the indexes, and the way that we do that is with bracket notation. Remember? So I'm gonna console.log names with a bracket, and I'm gonna put I into there because that states that we're gonna pass I, the value of I at the current moment, into the names array and access that index. So when we count 0 through 4, we're going to be going names at 0, names at 1, names at 2, names at 3, names at 4. So, boom. Now we have Ashley, Joel, Max, Ryan, and Matthew. All right? And now we can perform other operations on this code, while we're in here. So, okay. So I'm gonna write a console.log names just to see. So right here we have the value of all of our names, right? This is after the code runs. And if I wanted to add a is very smart. No problem, Ryan. So I in the for loop signifies 0 in the first instance, right? But after the first code block runs and we run it for the second time, we add 1 to it. So all this is doing is counting from 0 to the length in the names array. So we already found that the length of the names array is 5. But we want one less than that because there's only 4 indexes inside of the array. Right? And the way that we access a an index inside of an array is through bracket notation. So when we pass a number in here, we're accessing the value at that number, right? So what we're doing here is we're accessing every index one by one from 0 to the length of the names array. When you added I. Oh, at the end? Okay. So what I'm doing here, now I have access to every, oh, here or here? Okay. I'm not sure which one. So this statement here adds 1 to I every single rotation of the code block. So this thing's running 1, 2, 3, 4 times because we're going to length minus 1, right? So now every time that this runs, I have access to the names array at that index. So the first time it runs, it has access to Ashley. The second time it runs, it has access to Joel. The third time it runs, it has access to Max. The fourth time it runs, it has access to Ryan. And the fifth time it runs, it has access to Matthew. And now I can perform operations on these indexes. So we have strings, so we can add another string to it. So what I did is I added is very smart. Let's make a difference so we can see is very smart. Sorry guys, not creative. Now every time we pass through this index, we're going to add is smart to the end of the array. So let's say length minus 2. And now only Ashley through Ryan is smart, but we also know Matthew's smart, but just not in this situation. All right, are we getting that, guys? Can you add names to the list after the fact? Yes, we can, which is different from most coding languages. So before I move on to the array functions, does everybody get the for loop? We're running the code multiple times depending on the expressions that we run in here. We also have a while loop, which does something very similar. But let's not get confused. I'll come back to that in a little bit. That's good. So let's say I have all these names, and we're doing a registration for class. So we all have all these students that want to take the class, but then you know we want to add a new student to the class because we need this list to be flexible, right? So there are functions that the array has, like length, and we can go over them real quick. Array method. So, okay. So we have the popping method, pop, right? Which removes the last index from the array, right? We have the push method, which adds a new element to the array, right? We have a shift method, which puts it to the front of the array. Oh, yeah. Removes the first array element and shifts all over one index, right? The unshift, which adds a new element to the array at the beginning and unshifts the older elements. We have a bunch of functions that are pre-written for us that we will be able to use. So in this situation, we want to add a new person to this names array, right? So we do names dot push. So in this situation, when we want to call a function on something else, we use the dot notation. All right. So like we have console dot log. Log is a function, is a method. Method and function mean the exact same thing. When we say method, it means it's pre-built into the code. We don't have to write it ourselves. So log is a pre-built function of console, and names is an array, so it has a pre-built-in function of push. So we want to push Joshua, right? And then I'm gonna put another console.log below it, so we see the difference. And now we have the original and then the new array, right? And let's say I don't want to be on the list anymore. You know, I dropped the class. It was a little bit too hard for me, and you know, I just need some time off. I'm gonna pop right off. All right. Did everybody get that? Cool. Cool, 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 cool. Okay. Do you guys want to see? Can you also add a function to sort the names? Yeah. Um, the I think we I think JavaScript might have a sort function automatically. Array.sort. Um, I don't really suggest using built-in sort functions. I know Python has a sort function, and um, now I know JavaScript has a sort function. Usually, when we talk about sorting, if we're if we're coming from the conventional uh, uh, educational view of programming, we try to learn sorting functions, which have I don't want to get too complex. They have time complexity to involved with the sorting, right? So when we have functions inside of code, right? We have to think about the input and the output, right? We have to think about if the input is infinitely vast, right? So if we had an array of everybody inside of the city, how well would this function perform? All right. And sometimes when we're sorting, we want to, well, ideally when we're sorting, we want to have a linear uh, relationship in that sort function, right? And if we use a function that has two uh, for loops, a for loop inside of a for loop, this is a good situation. We have now have uh, an exponential relationship. And when we have millions and millions of inputs, that could cause our computer to crash. So we have to be very careful about the sort functions that we use, but we can use it in this situation. It's not a big deal. I'm sorry to I'm sorry to be so critical about how I think about sort functions, but yeah. And I'm assuming it's sorting it by lexical value, maybe alphabetically. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, checks out. I think I added it. Yeah, it's different. And we also have a reverse function, which reverse, reverse, which reverses the array. All right. Would you guys want to go over some other methods that are pre-built in? No, Matthew, please interrupt as much as you can because I don't know if I'm going too fast or if I'm not explaining things well. I know you have a lot of questions, and that's totally fine. And I want to be there to answer your questions. Um, Now, would you guys want to learn some more built-in methods for like numbers or strings, I can teach you some cool things, and we can learn how to answer some questions. I feel like we have limited time left. Um, so I want to keep this name array around, but I can delete a lot of this other stuff. Okay. So we can turn a string into an array, right? A string. Okay. Well, the recording is up on YouTube, and you can also see me tomorrow in class, and you can ask me any questions, and I'll answer any questions for you. And also for everybody else, I'm available on Discord at all times. Please ask me questions. Um, so we can take a string and we can split it up into individual characters. So let's save my name as Joshua. And now I want to turn my name into an array, right? Where I can access every character individually, right? In Python, we can do this by just putting the box notation behind it. But in JavaScript, it's a little more difficult. In most languages, you can't do that. And this also is a method that you can use in all languages. It's dot split. So let's save this array to another name, so we have the difference between 1 and 2. So let's save this to my name array, which I know isn't that much different, but it's different enough. So we're gonna save it my name. So in this situation, we're accessing this variable right here, right? Dot split, and then not split, split, and then inside these parentheses, we have to set on what characters. Oh, okay. Sabrina, you see this set right here? This is an array. It's a collection of data types. So it can be a collection of anything you want in JavaScript. It can be a collection of numbers. It can be a collection of names, of pretty much anything. It just makes it very easy for us to access things individually and to move through a data set very very linearly. So if we have a bunch of names saved to variables, then we'd have to find each individual variable, and it is not really convenient. But if we save all these variables and put them inside of an array, then now we have access to every single variable. So if we take this string, we save it to my name, and then we perform a split function on it, we have to give the function a parameter of what we want to split this this string on. And we can split it on anything. We can split it on, characters. So if I wanted to split my name on the O's, it was split into 2 parts. I'm going to console.log this so we can see that what's happening. So we have a J in Shua, which isn't really helpful, but it shows you, we can split this on whatever we want. We can split on the S, but for this situation, I want to split it on every character. So I put in nothing. I just put an empty parenthesis, empty quotation mark. Now, when I say empty, I don't mean a space, because when I say a space, now it's going to look for a space. So in this situation, we're looking for every individual letter, right? So now I have this array of the letters in my name, right? And I can access those individually, one. which is really helpful because now we can write a for loop, right? And then now we can run a conditional if my name array, right, I. So now we're accessing every individual one, every individual index inside of this array equals j, j, capital J, capitalization matters. If it equals j, console log contains a j. So we see how we can move all those things together. And I know this sounds like solving stupid puzzles that I'm making up in my own head, but this is something that we actually use very often. So, I mean, there are other ways to do this process, but let's say if I was looking for let's say I was looking for an email address. So now we found this at symbol. We know that the at symbol means this is an email address, and now we can confirm and we can validate this is an email address, right? This prevents people from putting in, invalid credentials inside of a login box. We can do other things with this, but I feel like I've beaten a dead horse, and I want to go over one more method that is super important to me. It's the join method. It's the function in where we can take an array and turn it into a string, right? So I will run this real quick. And we have the array of my name split up, right? So we understand, or my email address, hypothetically, split up. So we're taking my name, we're saving it into a variable. We're taking that variable, we're splitting it on every character, and we're saving that into an array. And all we're doing right now is console.logging that array, right? But what if I want to put that back together? All right. All I have to do on the array is press dot join and then put a quotation mark inside there. This quotation mark states what are we going to combine these things with. So if I put a space, there are spaces between every single character. If I put nothing, combines it in a singular string. If I put, hello, it's going to put hello between every single character in the array. All right. This really helps when we're trying to, let's say we're looking through, we're trying to encrypt or decrypt someone's code, right? We're going to find something that matches. We're going to take out what's important, and then we're going to put everything back together. I feel like we've learned a good amount, and I don't want to move forward because no problem, Ashley. I think you've already left. Oh, there you go. I feel like it's a good amount, and I don't want to teach you guys too much, even though this is a really big step. Literally, like, we can start writing code with just what we learned today. And I'm going to show you guys the best place how to learn code, like best place where you can learn code. It's codewars.com. You also can go to LeetCode. Um, all you have to do is you find the language you want to write in. I've written in C++, F sharp, Java, C sharp, and Ruby and JavaScript. Yikes. And then we're gonna find we're gonna click on fundamentals because we want to train a really easy question, and we're gonna pick train. That's awesome. Um, let's find an easier question for everybody. If we click on this kata, we go over to the left, dashboard says kata. We want to find a difficulty of 8 or 7. Um, don't push yourself too hard. I remember. Oh, what it was a good or bad? Okay. Um, yeah, this is a big part of getting a job. Unfortunately, they're gonna sit you down. They're gonna tell you to answer a question in front of them. The trick is you don't have to get it right. The trick is you have to vocalize how you're getting the question, how you're answering the question. They don't care if you get it right or wrong. They want to let you. They want to see what your thought process is. That's all you have to do. Um, I have moved forward in interviews getting a question wrong. Um, well, fundamentally wrong. I've also had interviews where the the interviewer disappeared, and I did the whole question in a different way, and whatever. The good what the point is, ask questions, speak out loud, think creatively, and you'll do fine. So we're gonna click on kata, and we're gonna pick a difficulty of 8 or 7, and then we're just gonna answer a couple questions, right? Okay. Train, right? This is real pressure answering questions in front of a bunch of people. This is pretty straightforward. Your goal is to create a function that removes the first and the last characters of a string. You're given one parameter, the original string. You don't have to worry it with the strings with less than 2 characters. Okay, so this is gonna give us a and we see all the questions and answers right here. Not the answers, but like the return of the function. We have a function here named remove char. It takes a string, right? So what did we just learn, right? If we want to remove the first or the last integer or index of a string, we need to turn it into an array, right? So we're gonna say let string array equal to string str with the parameter that they gave us dot split. Okay, so I like to have my replit open, so we were just on, just so I don't have to keep running code inside here. So we have a function named remove char that takes a string, right? We're going to take that string, we're going to split it, so we have every individual index of that string, right? Right? And now we want to go through. We can do two things. Now we have an array. We can use an array function, or we can be creative and do it the hard way. All right. You'll see a lot of people writing confusing code. Yep, Algo Expert's definitely very good. LeetCode, any of them, they're all the same thing. They're just questions. All you gotta do is answer the questions. That's what makes you better at coding. Is really just coding in general. All right. So now that we have an array, we can just pop and push, pop and unshift the first two digits. But I feel like that's not really. I want to use all of my coding tools in this process, right? So let's go through. Let's go through the array and let's access every individual index in the array, right? So I'm just gonna console.log string uh, string array I, right? So I'm going to take this and test this. All right. Oh. Oh. So now we're going through and we're accessing um, every single uh, index inside of this string array, right? I want to write an if statement to check the value of of the I, right? So if I is 0, which is the first, so what we want to do here is we want to take off and the last, um, the first and the last character of the string. So that'd be at index 0 and at index string array dot length, right? So I can check if I equals to 0 or, which is 2 lines, I is equal to string string array dot length -1, and then I'm just gonna console dot log that. All right, string array. So I just get the last 2 letters E and T. Right now, I don't want this. I don't want E and I don't want T. Right, I want everything else but that. So I can say if I is not equal to 0 and I is not equal to string array or the and. Yeah. So what this is saying is I is not equal to 0 and I is not equal to length the length of the array -1. So that gives us everything but the first and the last digit, right? So what we can do here is that we can create a variable let return let's say value, right? And we have it set to nothing, right? But what we can do is we can take the string value and we can take value plus equals string array, all right? And then once this is all done running, we'll just return value, all right? And I'm just gonna console.log this whole function. So we'll see the output, and it should give me undefined. Oh, we'll just set this to a string. Does everyone understand my train of thought here? So if we take this, come back in here, like technically this is not like the most efficient way to write this code, right? We could use pop and push and it'll be a lot faster. And I bet you we're gonna find a bunch of people that have done it like that. But don't try to use pre-made functions. The purpose of this is to really think outside the box and just try to get these questions. And I answered it correctly. And now we just press attempt. Boom. And we passed it. All right. So my challenge for you guys is to try to do one of these questions. Just try to do one of the number 8s. If you get stuck, hit me up on Discord. We can do another question if you guys want. It's up to you. I just don't want to give you guys too much information at once, and this is why we're kind of doing this. I want to see, and also I want you guys to see how we can apply everything we learned to questions. And once you submit it, you can see. Oh yeah, slice. That'd been an awesome way to answer this question. Yeah. So this is the way I was talking about. These are other people's answers. This guy turned it into an array, and then he called shift, and he called pop, and he called join, and he returned it. This is a really good way of answering it too. Slice. Slice is a string function that slices, like literally just chops out part of the string depending on the values that you pass to it. And -1 here stands for the last number in the array. Yeah, just do one casually. If you have time on Sunday or Saturday and you want to spend 20 minutes doing a question, that's it. It's not really a big deal. I just want you guys to think creatively when coding. I don't want to teach you something and you guys just regurgitate it. I've been in those classes before, where you're just learning something and you just know how to do one function. I want you guys to learn how to do whatever you need to do in code. So go into Code Wars or LeetCode or Hacker Rank, Owl Expert. Answer one question. When I'm training for interviews, I'll usually do like one question a day or one question every 2 days just to get warmed up. And also there are hacking competitions, coding competitions hosted on these websites. You can definitely network with a lot of people. There also are what are they called? Hackathons. Yeah, Joel, definitely, please. There are a lot of hackathons coming up. I think Mint Beans is a big company. Mint Beans. And they do a combination of things. They'll do coding competitions. They'll do competitions where you have to build something in a allotted amount of time. This is a good way to get jobs. This is a good way to meet people. And you work as a team too. So if you guys are interested and we learn a bunch of code, maybe we can join a hackathon and we can do a hackathon one of the next semester. It's not about winning or losing. It's more about a lot of companies will come sponsor it, and they'll be like IBM will be like, we just invented a new AI, and we want you guys to write code to interact with this AI. Or GM will be like, we invented a new way to unlock cars. Try to try to penetrate it to unlock cars or something very simple. They'll give you like a function of their company, and you have to build something with it. Um, and it's a lot of stress. Not a lot of stress, but like it's usually we have to stay coding for like probably 2 days straight, which I know is probably pretty hard for everybody's schedule. But if we plan it very much in advance, we can definitely have a lot of fun, and we can meet a lot of people, and it would definitely will help you branch out and network with new people. Um, so we have about 10 minutes left in the class. I want to go save this time for answering any questions. I know we covered a whole bunch in class today, and I'm asking a whole bunch of you just to answer questions based off what we learned. Um, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. We all understand that functions are blocks of code that we can rerun. If statements are conditional code that's ran. Uh, Switch statements are very similar to that. It takes a expression and then finds a case that matches it. Um, for loop just runs over and over and over again until it meets the conditions originally set. Uh, we have different data types. Yeah, it's gonna take a little while. Um, I won't lie to you. The way you get good at code is just coding a bunch. Um, oh, I would really suggest over the winter break, try to spend a little time every day coding. Um, when I first started coding, I was working as a boiler mechanic. So I would come home at like 6 o'clock at night, and I would stay coding until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning every day, and that's how I learned it very fast. But you have to understand, I totally understand that's not really doable for everybody, but the more time you put into it, the better you're gonna get. Um, and if you really want to make this your career, um, you're gonna spend a lot of time coding, even on your practice make perfect. Even on your off time, what makes you really yeah, no problem. What really makes you good is putting time into it. So a switch case is kind of like an a it's kind of like an if block, right? An if block searches for a true value to execute. A switch case searches for a case value to execute. All right. So in the switch, we're gonna pass the string, right? Because the string's getting passed here, and that's the only thing we have access to. All right, not a big deal. Now when we write these curly braces, we're stating that anything inside this switch case, the switch case is encapsulated by these curly brackets, right? And it's gonna run through all the cases into the in the switch case until it finds one that matches, right? So the way that we write cases is, you know, we write case, no, do that, write case, and then we write a parentheses for the case, all right? Um, and I want to check if this string says hello. If it says hello, strings might be a little bit funny. I don't know if they work exactly like this, but let's try. Console.log. Actually, you know what? Return hi. Right? And then we're gonna write a break, which means after this code is done running, we're good. It satisfies the requirements. Good. We're gonna write another case, right? Um, so we're gonna pass eloquent into this, right? So I want to write a case for eloquent. and then we're gonna return. Wow. Right. So it searches for the match, and then returns the code inside the block. I know it's not like a traditional block like you usually see in JavaScript, but this is more like a Python block where the indexes state what's going to get called. We also can set a default case just in case nothing gets called. And I'm pretty sure we just write default. Um, yeah, we write default, and if nothing gets called, then the default value gets ran. Like I said, don't really get caught up about switch cases too much. I don't really use them that often. Um, I've used them once. I had a Python project that I built to yeah, definitely. Or like maybe like a switchboard for like a phone operator. It's kind of like ancient technology. But you look for the same value and you plug it in, you know? Um or like a an elevator. You press a button and once you hit that level, you come out, you know? Uh I yeah, it's like a vending machine. Um I only have used this limited times, like I was saying. Actually, I wrote some code at the beginning of the pandemic to email um the constituents, your constituents, your email your representatives in your uh in your in your area. So you wrote, your zip code 11421, right? And then it looked for a match of 11421, and then it returned, the email address of that person, and then it would email that person a bunch of times. Um, so there are a bunch of cases where you can use this. Um, I would not get too caught up because you might not really see it that often. But like I said, these are just tools for you to use. You can use them in any way you want. Saying that, we only have 4 minutes left. I don't want to make you guys late to your classes or anything else you got going on today. I really, really appreciate you guys showing up today. The recording for this class will be on YouTube. I will have another class on Saturday morning. We will probably move a little bit forward from this. Maybe do a couple more coding questions. It's only an hour long. And if you have any other questions, please, hit me up on Discord. I am more than welcome to answer any of your questions on Discord. It's quick, it's easy, and answer more questions on Code Wars. If you do that, no problem, Matthew. If you do that, you will be in good hands. It's just going to take a little time for you to get really comfortable with the language. And once you get comfortable with one language, like I said, you can move from language to language. A good word of advice is if you only meet 50% of the job requirement, go for it still because you can learn any language on the fly. You're smart enough. You're smart enough to be here. You're smart enough to learn any language. You guys can do this. I really believe in you. Have a good weekend, guys. I'll see you guys either on Saturday or next week. All right.